Hey everybody, this is Joe. Thank you for watching my Giga Texas construction update video. On my previous video, I talked about 18 new permits and I went through 6 of them about new construction or rework going on at Giga Texas. And I was surprised by many of the comments by long-term viewers of mine that have said that they were unaware of all of the changes going on inside of the factory. And that kind of surprised me considering that I've been covering this in depth for quite some time. But I thought I would start back with a year ago at the Cyber Rodeo, and we'll have this discussion and kind of put into context what's been going on. As you can see by this map, that's generally how Giga Texas was arranged at the time of Cyber Rodeo. You can see that very large white space that was mostly empty at that time, and the colored in spaces for the production line were generally on the first floor with a few second or third floor examples at that time. But a lot of the factory was very empty, and a lot of people commented on that, despite the fact, as you can see here in this blue highlighted area, this is the only area that was available to the public to actually see. So we only got a small glimpse of what was going on in Giga Texas at that time. Much of the rest of the factory that we didn't see was empty and has been upgraded, and a lot of changes in that time. Here's a brief rundown of some of the major changes that have happened at Giga Texas since Cyber Rodeo. We see the Phase 2 building expansion work underway now to lengthen the entire size of Giga Texas. We saw that the body in white second floor is now having the expansion and fitting out work, and the stamping machine structure has had new isolation foundations and new stamping machines installed in that primary original section as well. Moving to the casting machine section, we see that there have been structural improvement, particularly to the concrete columns, slab rework, the 9,000-ton Gigapress, and other equipment has been installed. In the paint shop, a complete second modular painting system was installed, most of it in 2022. It is now online, and most of that work is now completed. In the 4680 cell production area, we see that the 4680 production has ramped. Industrial equipment has been installed in addition to production equipment, additional internal construction across 4 floors. At the structural pack equipment and production area, especially on the second and third floors, this has really been fitted out since Cyber Rodeo, and additional robotic assemblers have been installed. And also, the main entrance, as many people have talked about, both inside and outside, has had architectural and structural changes, including removing much of the second floor. And finally, in this Phase 2 section that was completely empty during Cyber Rodeo, we've seen General Assembly Lines 2 and 3 be assembled and constructed, removal of about half of the second and most of the third floors so that they can install equipment and production lines through those floors. And an addition of a 4th floor mezzanine, production equipment has been installed, and the end of line has been rerouted from exiting at the south to now exiting on the east side. And as you can imagine, a lot of permits have been filed over that time. There's been well over 100 filed with the city of Austin to do all of this work. And I recently talked about those new 18 that have been filed within the last 50 days. And as mentioned, I went through 6 of those in my previous video. So check those out in addition to what we talk about here. I thought a few examples might be appropriate to help put to context what the work has been done and what we just discussed. Here you can see the example of the 4th floor mezzanine addition, and the map shows you approximately where that is located. Here is an example of some of the 3rd floor equipment that has been added into this section. Again, you can see with the map approximately where this is located. In this image, you can see both the 2nd and 3rd floor production lines and some of the construction and equipment that has been located into this area that was at Cyber Rodeo is empty. Here's another example of the 3rd and 4th floor mezzanine construction and some more equipment. And you can see how this entire section has really transformed in the last year. And finally, this is a good image showing both the 3rd and the 2nd floor, and then the opening on the 2nd floor down to the ground floor. And this is over where the original end of line used to be located. Now that we have this context in mind, let's talk about some of the new permits and how it relates to all of this construction work. And wherever possible, I'll include a grid map, as you can see, with the approximate location based on the permit. This permit was filed on the 14th of April, and it's for various sizes of PVC underground sanitary sewer systems to be installed in this new section of Giga Texas. This permit was also filed on the 14th of April, and it talks about different sizes of domestic cold water main risers and plumbing to be installed. It also talks about general assembly in this side being 3 floors. This new permit is the 14th of April. This is more domestic cold water lines, and you can see approximately where that is located on the south end. This permit was also the 14th of April, and it talks about more of that cold water main installation and how this routes into and underneath stamping as shown. This one is also the 14th of April. It talks about more of the teardown and above ground sanitary waste and vents. And again, here it says General Assembly is 4 floors high. The drive unit in this particular permit is listed as containing 3 floors, and this is for more water heaters and sanitary waste pipe systems. This permit, another 14th of April, has to do with stamping 2 and installing the domestic cold water line above ground running through the south of the facility. In this particular permit on the 14th of April, the paint shop is listed as containing 3 floors, and this is for more of that domestic water and sanitary sewer installation. This permit was filed on the 9th of March. It has to do with body in white, 2nd floor, a rather large floor sink installation, and then tying that into the new sewer system in that approximate location. And then finally, this is talking about cold water pipe using copper, and it runs to the west and on the south on the 1st floor until it rises up to the 2nd floor in this particular area. Okay, so that's a rather brief and quick discussion about all of the changes that have happened over the last year, where they're happening, and why. I hope that you found this discussion helpful and informative and puts into context all of the new permits that we see being filed with the City of Austin. So let's get ready to go fly around the site. My drones are ready and raring to go. Let's go flying over Giga Texas. Well, good morning and happy Cinco de Mayo here at Giga Texas. Now, it's an extremely busy day, so we're going to start off right out the bat talking about this clearing below the drone. This is where dirt has been stored, but they've been doing some soil test sampling here as well, which is very interesting. Also, this new clearing continues to get more fill dirt, as you can see, as they continue to raise the grade up in preparation for future construction here. As we approach the building, just going back to what we talked about in the video intro, from the windows up on this side is the body in white, and this is where over the last 12 months we've seen a lot more materials and equipment put inside, and they've also been installing many more robots, and some of them just for storage, but others have been installed. So that entire section has been really transformed in the last 12 months. Another thing that we talked about in the intro is the new east side end of line exit point. You can see with the arrow and some of the vehicles coming out. Now, this was changed from the south end, partly because of the new construction that's going on in the south end, but also because of all of the interior work that's going on in the General Assembly on the other side of the building. As we continue further to the south, this is the stamping machine structure, and it's a one-story building, but over the last 12 months, we've seen new isolation foundations and new stamping machines installed, all of which has happened since Cyber Rodeo. Now, as I pivot back to prepare to go over the power lines, I noticed this. You can see there's 2 blue wrapped items, but the one in the middle is now missing. There used to be 3. That has now been moved inside stamping 2 on the south side, and that means that they are assembling this last portion of a stamping machine, which is great to see. That means that the isolation foundations and much of the concrete work is completed, and as we'll get a peek inside a little bit later, the ground slab is getting completed as well. But here's a nice closer view. You can clearly see one of the 3 has been moved away, and it looks like they may be preparing for the next one to move. As we get closer here in the corner, you see this excavation. I accidentally said that I thought it was a gas pipe. It's actually a sewage pipe, and I want to make that correction from my previous video. Over on the top left, you can see more of the earthwork and that area to the south of the cyber pond getting prepared. And as we turn towards the continuous flight auger drilling system, you can see crews at the bottom with all of the pumps necessary to provide the concrete into this tall drill, this kind of yellow crane. You can see the drill on that apparatus, and all that kind of concrete slurry mix that you see is really part of what is injected into that bore. And then they put those rebar cages down inside, and you can see many of those rebar cages next to the other crane just waiting for installation. And I'm going to take this opportunity to get a little lower and try to look into stamping 2, as I mentioned before. The lighting is not great, but if you look at this door here where I zoomed in, you can see the workers are preparing the yellow moisture barrier, the rebar, and the final stages for that ground slab to be installed. This is also inside there where that component that we talked about is being installed as another stamping machine, or at least a metal folding machine. The left-hand side door still looks like this dirt inside, but I know that they are working farther to the north on this side as well. As I mentioned before, the platform has been removed. Now you can see the concrete at the base of that opening has been removed as well as part of the preparation for construction on this side. Speaking of which, this is a very exciting new development. You can see on the middle of the screen, the GeoPier equipment has arrived and they're setting it up for operation. What this is another method of building piers into the ground, and these will also be used to support foundations or footings for the beams and columns that will be part of the structure that is constructed here. And the combination of the GeoPier piers and the continuous flight auger piers indicates that we are on that next phase of construction, which is outstanding. And the reason why they're using two different kinds of piers, it just depends on the loading at that point of the building. But it's great to see both of those now in operation. Just south of the cyber pond, you can see where they have been preparing this grade right next to the grass, and it's kind of a little bit darker color. It's interesting to see that they are doing that. And as I proceed over towards the south bridge, I'll pop up over these smaller power lines just to give you another view of the horizontal drilling operation that is going on here. Again, this is a way to drill underneath the river and come up on the south bank and allow installation of what I think may be a reclaimed or a sewage high-density polyethylene black pipe that's contiguous, and it's just pulled through that bore right underneath the Colorado River. So great to see the progress there. As I turn back towards the main building, this is a good overall view of the south end and all of the changes that are going on this side of the building. So let's reposition the drone and get a little bit lower and take a look at some more detail views. Stopping here just to show again where they are manufacturing more of those rebar cages. You see some of them stockpiled here. That's for the continuous flight auger piers, and it looks like with the amount of rebar, there's going to be significant numbers of those in addition to the GeoPiers. Some more materials here on the left-hand side of the screen, and as I pan back towards the east, this gives you a really good view of the work that is going on here with the two different kind of pier systems, the GeoPier in the middle and the continuing flight auger pile system up on the upper right. As we continue back towards the building, a couple of things that I want to show you. One is you can see that tall black with concrete top groundwater well, and it looks like that's continuing to be prepared for possibly changing its altitude to match up with the grade. And then here next to the building, looks like more trench work. They're using the water to prepare the dirt and keep the dust down. And you can see more of those green pipes. Those are sewage pipes. It looks like they're doing either some reconfiguration work here or preparing to install more of the sewage pipes in this section. As we get closer to this platform, we can see what appears to be ducting getting ready to be moved up onto the top of the platform. Some views inside, and then onto the right-hand side of the screen, you can see some of this rental equipment has been installed right next to where the windows had been removed. So what I'm going to do is take advantage of this opportunity, and we're going to cross over the highway and we'll resume the flight there and take a look at some of the changes going on in the West Support Facility. Now we passed by the materials being stored on the north end. We can see all of the trailers here in the west expansion part of the warehouse on wheels. Again, all of these trailers are used to bring in items and materials for production, and then they are temporarily stored here as they're empty, and then they're swapped out and returned back to the suppliers. You see all of this concrete in the middle. This is part of the concrete that was removed out of that south and west side of General Assembly, removing big sections of the second and third floor to install much of that production equipment and the reconfiguration changes that we talked about in the video intro. And in addition to that, we can see here earthwork continues to reclaim the last portions of the hills and the ponds that were part of the old sand and gravel mine. You can see this black membrane that's called geotextile membrane. It's being laid out to help strengthen and reinforce the soil. And then you can see a dirt top layer is being put over that geotextile membrane. And then they bring in the gravel aggregate as sort of the top layer. And then after this is all done, then we can see what type of construction they may be doing, or they may be just preparing this for more of the warehouse on wheel trailers. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see workers rolling out some of these rolls of geotextile membrane. They're going to be positioning that, and then they will roll it out to continue the installation on this west side. But as we fly across back towards the main building, you can get a really good sense of how this progress is continuing. And with the gravel mix being put on, this indicates that the final grade, at least for this stage of construction, has now been achieved, which is really great to see. And I can't wait to find out if it's going to be the trailers for the warehouse on wheels, or if there may be some sort of construction beginning. But as I turn back, this gives you a really good overall view of this entire side and how much wider this has become with the work that they have been doing on that graded area. Okay, we returned back across the highway to the main building, and you can see the plastic is in place on the windows and continue to grow so they can do that white staining of the concrete walls. You can see some of the blue tarps on the bottom to prevent any of the drips or overspray. You can also see more of the landscaping trees. The forms for more concrete are being laid out. The concrete benches that have been put around the trees. And then here you can see the crews installing these terraces again on the cyber berms. They use this to put potted plants. And I think that this is just being done as a temporary measure for the shareholders meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And then I would expect to see that removed again, and then they'll do a final treatment. But you can also see work on those steel components, more of the framework for concrete, and just generally how this entire section appears today as they continue to reconfigure the main entrance. On the left, you can see how the crews are doing more of the white stain work as well. I thought I would give you this perspective on the main entrance, and then we're going to climb up in altitude and look down sort of at a bird's eye view and just sort of get a good sense of how this entrance looks today. So let's fly over the roof and we'll resume the narration on the east side of the building. On the bottom left of the screen, you can see those temporary cooling units. These have been used for the body in white section of Giga Texas while they're continuing to install and get operational the HVAC for this building. Now, on the left-hand side, you can see some of the Model Ys being arranged on this dirt section. This is near the entrance for the end-of-line vehicles to arrive, and then they do final checkouts and testing, also supercharging before the vehicles are ready for the transport. And you can see many of the end-of-line workers in those yellow vests, and they drive the vehicles over here, and they do a lot of those final checks before the vehicles are ready for transport. As we fly over the helicopter pad, this is another good view of that wind tunnel and the breaker wall to prevent the wind from going over where the vehicles are driving. But I don't see any activity here today. As we cross over this water detention pond, we can see the activity in the new vehicle staging and transportation lot. Of interest, look on the middle of the screen. You can see these two tents, a lot of vehicles lined up here. It looks like they're doing more of the checkouts on the vehicles here, and this may be an expansion to what we saw in that other smaller parking lot where they do similar checkouts. But very interesting to see as their procedures change and modify here at Giga Texas. As we fly over the road, I'll give you a good view of the east warehouse on wheels. And this is similar to what we saw on the west side of the highway. And it looks to me like there's quite a bit of trailers here as well. Again, this is a concept where they use the trailers to hold the materials so they don't have to use up the space inside of the building, and it speeds up the process with the drivers. At the bottom of the screen, you can see more of those superchargers that were removed from the south end of the building. And at some point, I expect to see those reinstalled somewhere here at Giga Texas. So as we fly towards the north over the trailers, we can see the ever-growing material staging yard just to the north here. One of the things that's interesting is in the middle of the screen, you can see these 3 TKS tanks. This is part of a paint system, and I suspect it may be related to the Cybertruck production, and that's because there are stamped sections of the vehicle that are underneath the stainless steel that I believe do need to be painted. But anyway, something to monitor as time goes on. As we fly over these repair shops and temporary workshops, we get closer to the die shop itself. You can see amongst the trees at the bottom right that all 4 of those electrical boxes have now been installed. All of the conduit has been installed, and all of the trenches have been filled back in. You can see the progress on the wall panels on the south end, and we'll also take a closer look at the work going on to install the roof insulation and weatherproof membrane. As we get closer here, this brown section, what you're seeing is that there's 2 layers of insulation that are installed, and then after this, they will roll out and then install that white weatherproof membrane. And the progress right now looks like they're getting pretty close to about 50%, maybe slightly more of the roof completed. A lot more materials pre-positioned on the roof for that work to continue. On the bottom corner here, we see more of the formwork around that double column. That's to complete the perimeter grade beam. That is needed partially because the wall panels will rest on that section. Speaking of which, we see more of the wall panels being installed on this side, framing out a very large opening. And then here we see formwork for the perimeter grade beam being installed. We see yellow moisture barrier and rebar around this deep foundation. This is indicating that we'll see the concrete pour for the ground slab soon. And you also see quite a bit of work going on the top of that deep foundation now. Once the ground slab is completed here, this section, at least the ground portion, should be nearly finished, and then we'll be watching for the wall panels to be installed. As I continue to proceed towards the east along the north side of the die shop, you can see there's more trenching underway. The blue water pipe is being installed, and we've seen more of that going down the alleyway between these 2 structures, so it looks like this is teeing off on that installation. Here's a good view of the west side and how it looks today with many of the materials and some of the maintenance shops. And then the berm on this side continues to be removed. This whole area is being widened, and many of the dump trucks that we see working on the south side and also in other sections of the site are getting their fill dirt here and then transported down to the south. We see more of the berm work here next to this tree as well. And also these large tanks, those silver stainless steel tanks, 3 of them have now been relocated, but they're still waiting for installation. North end of the building, we can see those green load levelers, some more of the concrete vaults, this temporary structure for keeping some of the materials out of the weather until they're installed. And then as we proceed to the chilling unit, this is that large stainless steel structure with all the pipes and pumps and tanks. It looks like work continues on this very intricate installation. And then the nitrogen generators are passing off to the left. We can see just generally how this alleyway looks today, and it looks like it's really starting to be cleaned up. And we also see workers on the trench here installing more of the electrical conduit, and it kind of runs throughout this entire section underneath the ground, and it's what will eventually bring the power to both of these large structures. As I turn around to face the battery cathode plant, this is a good view of the south end. I'll try to give you some views into this open section, and it looks like it's still without much material or equipment yet, but we'll continue to monitor that. But what is very clear is this 7-story platform has now been fully assembled. It also has quite a bit of the electronic and other machinery installed as well. And as a unit, this entire thing will be moved inside. Now, if you compare its size to the opening size, it doesn't look like they can use a crane to move it in. So what I think that they may end up doing is some sort of self-propelled modular transporter to lift it slightly and then move it into that structure. But the reason why that opening is as big as it is and has been there for a long time is in preparation for this entire unit to be assembled and then moved inside. We see more of the earthwork here on this east side, and it looks like they are preparing it for the next stage, and much of the materials that used to be stored here have been moved away or moved inside. We can see those 2 temporary garage doors, if you will, that open to the outside, and that's a way for them to keep that closed in case of inclement weather. More materials, more work on the east side of the cathode plant. We can see this horseshoe kind of road next to the cell test lab, and more work going on that smaller structure as well. I wanted to take the opportunity and fly up to this clearing just to show some of the progress and also continued removal of this hill. You can see there's an excavator, some of the trucks are picking up that dirt, and then they're relocating this to other sites further to the south around Giga Texas. But it looks like the idea is to remove this large hill. So let's climb in altitude. Let's fly over the battery cathode plant and die shop and reposition the drone to look at some more activity around Giga Texas. Just as we saw on the south end by the South Bridge with the horizontal drilling operation, here we see more of that long black HDPE pipe and some trenching operations here to install it. This will eventually connect all the way to the south, and it will provide treated water and possibly sewage for the battery cathode and the die shop locations. As we continue to fly towards the temporary electrical switch yard, we'll continue around to the south side to show you the materials that are and the equipment that's being stored here. We can also see a lot of deliveries at the Megapack construction site, and we'll visit that a little later in the video. On the south end of the electrical switch yard, we see what looks to be cleaning up and just putting all of the mobile man lifts and equipment together, kind of giving it a more finished look. The control room and the fencing looks like it's nearly completed. And on the north end, we see more of the installation of that gravel mix. And that needs to be spread all the way across the entire floor of the switchyard before they can energize the system, because it provides some grounding capability in addition to the underground grounds that have been installed. And this is a good higher altitude view looking across the switchyard back to Giga Texas and across these new steel power poles. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot more activity on the Megapack construction site. So let's cross over the power lines, and then I'll bring the drone down and we'll take a look at some of the detail work. One thing is noticeable is quite a bit of the large gray conduit has been delivered now on site. More stakes here on the north end for possibly drilling. It'll be something that I monitor, and you can see kind of a drill nearby this section getting ready for work. And also we can see these two large parallel trenches with more of the conduit being installed. We see some of the long sections, and also we'll see some of the 90-degree bend sections as well. And it looks like this is how they're going to have all the underground conduit and then connect all of the Megapacks. Just don't know exactly the size of the Megapack system, but I have some Patreons that believe it's going to be about 96 individual Megapacks. So that's definitely something to watch for. Here we see more of the installation of the groundwater or the stormwater piping system. Some of it's in that steel corrugated pipe, but they're also starting to use some concrete pipe as it goes underneath the power lines. Crews are very busy installing more of the electrical conduit here. You can see in the two parallel lines, and now at the south they're starting to fill it back in, indicating that that is completed, and it will connect to these concrete vaults, go underneath Tesla Road, and then it will enter over at the the casting machine structure on that northeast corner. And as we fly over here, we can start getting a sense for where this is going to happen. One of those two trenches goes underneath the northeast corner wall, and then the other, as you can see, is being routed around this berm that's being widened. And eventually it will reach over near where those rack mounts are, and then it will tie into the existing electrical power that enters the building at that point in time. We also see a very large bridge crane rail being delivered here inside casting machine structure. There was a second one, and we'll see that in just a moment. On my previous video, I showed you these over on the west side material staging getting ready for movement, and today they're being moved inside. I think this is a great indication that the work of installing the Giga presses and associated equipment is really coming along well inside the casting machine structure. All of these crates have been delivered in the last couple of days. We see some of them being broken down and some interesting castings. Again, it's hard to tell if they're anything other than Model Ys, but it is interesting to continue to monitor. As I mentioned, we do have another one of the bridge cranes being moved over here from the west side using a yard truck. And this gives you a pretty good idea of the size of this particular bridge crane rail. And there's obviously two of them. You can see one in the upper left that we saw earlier, and this one. And again, this is going inside casting, and I take this as a great sign with the installation of the Hydra Giga presses. We see some of these black and yellow temporary ramps now been moved up to this section of the building, which is new. The doors for the plastics machine section and manufacturing section are open, and as we fly over the two platforms for the 4680 production section, we see again this northwest corner with the cooling tower enclosures, the temporary scaffolding, some of the plastic wrap, and the vapors coming out of the vents. So that's a wide-ranging, detailed, a lot of great activity going on here on Cinco de Mayo at Giga Texas. And I hope that you enjoyed the detailed discussion in the intro to give an idea of all of the work that has been going on inside the building in the last 12 months, some of the new permits, and then how the entire site looked today. As always, thank you very much for your support and for watching these videos. I do very much appreciate it. I wish you a very happy Cinco de Mayo and a great weekend. Take care.